Hello, happy Monday, and I hope your weekend went well, and I hope your Monday went well. And welcome to another segment of Fresh, Natural, and Live. We have a very, very exciting show today. A colleague and good friend of mine for a number of years will be here talking to us about the future of nutrition. As a cardiologist, I consider myself a nutritional cardiologist, and we've treated thousands of patients over the years helping them to reverse their chronic illnesses such as diabetes and high blood pressure and high cholesterol and heart disease with nutrition. Again, I rely on the scientific literature, and there's a wealth of information out there. Many of you utilize internet search tools to find answers about how to naturally reverse this and that. And it's very hard to know what's right and what's wrong. That's why it's important to have scientific experts and experts like myself and many other clinical colleagues. We rely on the scientific evidence of many scientists over the years. And one of the giants in the field is going to be here with us tonight, sharing his insights about nutrition, not only from a historical perspective, but it's giving us a look at the the future of nutrition and the current science as we understand it, and how we can apply that science to better improve our overall life and well-being, and also better improve our abilities to care for our patients. So I'm excited about that. Dr. Colin Campbell will be joining us tonight. First, I want to bring in our panelists. Right now, we have our resident nutritionist, Isosa E, aka Raw Girl, and Isosa manages patients around the world with nutritional counseling, behavioral counseling, and the bit. She's an author, a certified nutritionist. I think she's even a raw chef, raw foodie, etc. Good evening, Isosa. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
Our pediatrician, Dr. Celeste Palmer, will be here later. She's out saving lives. She just texted me. She'll be rushing into the studio really soon, and she'll be on in the studio as soon as she makes it in. But without further ado, I want to introduce our guest tonight, Dr. Colin Campbell. Many of you watching knows who he is, and he is a giant in the field. Dr. Campbell tonight is going to review the scientific understanding of nutrition and its application to our health. Dr. Colin Campbell is an American biochemist. He specializes in the effect of nutrition on long-term health. He is the Jacob Gould Sherman Professor Emeritus of Nutritional Biochemistry at Cornell University. Dr. Campbell has become known for his advocacy of a low-fat, whole foods, plant-based diet. He's the author of over 300 research papers and 3 books: The China Study, published in 2005, which he co-authored with his son Thomas M. Campbell; Whole Food, or Whole, I should say, published in 2013, and The Low Carb Fraud, published in 2014. Dr. Campbell was featured in 2011 documentary Forks Over Knives. He was one of the lead scientists in the China Cornell Oxford project on diet and disease in 1983 by Cornell University and the University of Oxford and the Chinese Academy of Preventive Medicine, that work to explore the relationship between nutrition and cancer, heart disease, and metabolic diseases. The study was described by the New York Times as the Grand Prix of epidemiology. His early life and education: he grew up in a dairy farm. He studied pre-veterinary medicine at Pennsylvania State University, where he obtained his BS degree and attended veterinary school at the University of Georgia for a year. He completed his MS in nutrition and biochemistry at Cornell University, where he studied under Clive McKay, and his PhD in nutrition, biochemistry, and microbiology was also at Cornell University. His career consisted of he joined MIT as a research associate. At that time, he worked for 10 years at the Virginia Tech Department in Biochemistry and Nutrition before returning to Cornell University in 1975 to join its Division of Nutritional Sciences. He has worked as a senior science advisor to the American Institute of Cancer Research and sits on the advisory board of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He is known in particular for his research derived in part from the China Study, that appears to link the consumption of animal protein with the development of cancer and heart disease. He argues that casein, a protein found in milk from mammals, is the most significant carcinogen we consume. Dr. Campbell has followed a 99% vegan diet since around 1990. He does not identify himself as a vegetarian or vegan because he said they often infer something other than what I espouse. He told the New York Times the idea is that we should be consuming whole foods. We should not be relying on the idea that genes are determinants of our health. We should not be relying on the idea that nutrient supplementation is the way to get nutrition, but it's not. It's like about whole plant foods. He was a member of since 1978 of several United States National Academy of Science expert panels on food safety and holds an honorary professorship at the Chinese Academy of Preventive Medicine. He's featured in the documentaries Forks Over Knives, Plant Eat, Vegucated, and Plant Pure Nation, a film produced by his son Nelson Campbell. Dr. Campbell also is on the advisory board of Naked Food Magazine, for which he also is a regular contributor of articles espousing plant-based diet. In 2010, at the cardiac surgery, former U.S. President Bill Clinton mostly adopted a plant-based diet after the recommendations of Drs. Dean Ornish, Dr. Esselstyn, and Dr. Campbell. So without further ado, I'm going to bring to the stage Dr. T. Colin Campbell. Dr. Campbell, welcome to Fresh Natural Live. And also I want to welcome Dr. Celeste Palmer to the show, who came in. Dr. Campbell, thank you for joining us tonight. Your background is more than a mouthful. I wanted to give our audience the full breadth of who you are and what you've done and how much of a giant you are in the field of nutrition. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Montgomery. I have to say a word really quickly, because it's
Sure.
a line for me. You and I met, I don't recall, maybe 10 years ago. When was it?
2009.
2009, yeah, over 10 years ago. And you were the first one when that actually had a whole clinic, along with a place to sit down and eat, and lecture to people, the laboratory to go with it. You're the first one in the country's first physician who put the whole package together. I was always very impressed with that, because you could walk all the way from the test tube to the fork. It was really nice, and I really appreciate what you just said. But I can't beat that. Go ahead.
Well, I think we've all stood on your shoulders. I think having the science, the evidence to back that up, has given us all in clinical medicine the ability to really move forward with confidence that there's a body of scientific evidence. And the work you did with the China study and many of the things you've done over the years of fighting the good fights, both political and the like, has really helped out the industry. And many of us work with much more confidence than we would otherwise have based on the work that you've done. So thank you, sir, for all that you've done. And I look forward to our discussion tonight. Again, I want to introduce you to our resident nutritionist, Iselsa E., and Dr. Palmer, pediatrician. We all advocate a plant-based diet in our work. We counsel patients and the like. And so that just gives you a background of our panel.
And Dr. Campbell, I'm a Cornellian, and I sat in on your plant-based nutrition class when I was a junior in college.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Nice, that's right.
Dr. Campbell, I am also a Cornell graduate
No,
of your program, of your plant-based nutrition program.
wow. Thank you very much. Yeah.
See, your influence is widespread.
I just hope some of my colleagues at Cornell who have not been particularly happy with me would be listening to this here right now. 2 Cornell graduates, great, fantastic.
Well, send them a link. We see Cornell graduates all over the place. So, I mean, your program is outstanding. So, Dr. Campbell, let's get into this discussion. I've read your books, and you've got a book coming out, and I want to get into that as well. But give us a little bit of a synopsis of where you started, and bring us up to maybe where we are now. I mean, give us some insight in terms of how you got, because you were raised on a dairy farm, and I recall you saying when you set out in some of your early investigations, you were looking at the benefit of how milk and animal protein can improve the health in people in certain societies. Give us a synopsis of that and kind of walk us through where you are now.
Yeah, let me say just three quick things. You said it right. I was raised on a dairy farm, milking cows actually by hand, I should say. And then I went away to graduate school. And my doctoral dissertation actually was focused on the idea of advancing the consumption of more protein, basically animal-based protein. And then thirdly, shortly after that, I was in a faculty position at Virginia Tech, and I was asked to sort of coordinate a program in the Philippines feeding malnourished children. And at that time, those of us in nutrition thought that the key problem with malnourished children in the world, and it was a very serious problem, obviously, but the key problem was they weren't getting enough protein. So it was protein for me, from my personal life, my education to that. And so, but I happen to have seen something in the Philippines that was really striking. I got the impression it wasn't published at the time, but it was what I thought I was looking at was children who got liver cancer, fairly common cancer in the Philippines. The children, there were children as young as 4 years of age who got liver cancer, told by my medical colleagues at the time. And I thought it was really odd. And looking a little further, a study came out of India with experimental animals and so forth. It seemed like higher protein consumption would cause more cancer and the liver cancer. That's what got me started. And I came back home again because I had to resolve that question. Does animal protein increase cancer risk? And so I got an NIH grant that lasted for the next 27 years. That was the centerpiece for many years. And then, of course, I did a big study in China too with my colleagues. And it was I had to turn the corner. I was faced with a proposition early on. The animal protein is not as valuable as what we tend to think it is. And we call it high quality. Everybody should consume as much as we can, et cetera, et cetera. But as we got into our research, I confirmed what some colleagues in India had done at the time. Yes, increasing animal protein increases cancer growth rate. From that point onwards, I took a little slower pace maybe in some ways, and because I really had to think about this very carefully and design the research and get it reviewed and all that. More I got into it, I just was overwhelmed with the idea that her whole idea of essentially worshiping, almost revering the consumption of animal protein was wrong. My background, I mean, I came from that background. And so the more I got into it, the more trouble I was causing. Like John Lewis said, I was causing good trouble in my mind. But so that's the way it went. And of course, in the process, a lot of my colleagues started to get a little unhappy with me. And then as years passed, they became ever more unhappy. And it's always been a tough road. But at the same time, had I not had those experiences, that pushback, and had I not also had academic or tenure, to be honest about it, if I had tenure for 50 years. If I didn't have that behind me, I wouldn't be sitting here now talking.
Wow. You mentioned that colleagues became angry. I mean, I know there are a lot of different motivations behind, people's sticking with animal protein. Share with us what your thoughts in terms of the motivation behind the anger. Was it just more dogmatic that they were just set in their ways on animal protein being good? Or were they being economically influenced? Or what do you think some of the reasons behind? Because you think if you have a new discovery, it's a new discovery, people get excited. But what was the reason? Was it dogmatic resistance toward change, or is it economic influence, or what at that time?
Well, I got a new book coming out this December, based on just asking that question. How did we get into this here really deep rut that's caused a lot of problems for me and the society at large, as far as I'm concerned? There's a historical reason, and I'll leave that for the book to come about. But basically, it was very clear that the ones who were most hostile to the idea were my friends in agriculture.
Mm.
Sort of dependent on that. But it was more than that, because the general public at large obviously considered protein probably the most important of all nutrients that we should be consuming. And by that, most people meant animal-based protein.
Yes.
So it really got fixed, Baxter, in our minds collectively. So much so, I call it a paradigm. We tend not to know what we don't know. And we certainly don't want to challenge things as so revered as this. And if we do, and if we don't have some protective device like academic freedom, it's kicked out. So it's been a very, very, I don't know, it's a very closed community in a sense, but it does involve almost all of our society. And so it's been challenging. But by the same token, as I say, that challenge actually allowed me to learn a lot more than I otherwise might have, just by their reactions.
Now, you have shared, I remember looking at the China study, and there was an interesting thing. And as a cardiologist, we look at cholesterol a lot. And, people think of elevated cholesterol to be associated with elevated risk of coronary disease. But I was looking at some of the data that you had in the China study, and also there's some recent antiviral data you had. But particularly in the China study, you showed there seemed to be a correlation with elevated cholesterol with cancer. Can you share that with us?
Yes. Not only that, that's what we saw in experimental animal studies in this case. So that was very clear. But since last talking to you about this question, Baxter, I've learned that, there was some early research on what causes cholesterol in our own serum to go up. We all tend to assume it's total fat, especially saturated fat. I mean, that's been the message we've all lived with. But in reality, way back over 100 years ago, there were some studies done at that time asking the same question. They sort of knew that as cholesterol goes up, heart disease follows thereafter. But then they did some studies on what causes cholesterol to go up. They concluded, this is 1926, University of Michigan, after about 15 years worth of research, they said the chief cause of elevated cholesterol in our serum is animal protein, more than the dietary cholesterol itself. And so this, I'm telling a sort of a little advance on our book, a little story about our book. But as years passed, every time an observation came up like that animal protein may be problematic, it was discarded. And something was put in its place. And saturated fat and total fat got put in its place. And so we blame saturated fat and total fat for the problem, when actually it's a correlate of the animal protein. But it's not just the animal protein also, it's our reverence for that nutrient almost. We consume that kind of diet, and naturally we tend to consume more saturated fat and more total fat. So I don't mean to dismiss that, but I only use it as an illustration of the history, showing that every time something came up about animal protein and its problems, it got dismissed one way or the other.
The interesting thing about animal protein, and part of the reason I raised that question is because I have my own little hypothesis regarding the elevated cholesterol, and I was really intrigued with the data that you had, and the fact that you associate the elevated cholesterol and the cancer with animal protein, not necessarily animal fat. Because animal protein is really a multidimensional food source. I mean, yes, it has saturated fat, but it has the animal protein itself, which has molecules that trigger inflammation. And then it has the byproducts of animal protein, which is ammonia and nitrous ammonia substances that has to be broken down by the liver. But it seems as though animal protein itself is a liver toxin. Would you go as far as to say that?
Oh, definitely. As a matter of fact, if we took, let's say, casein, the main protein of cow's milk, for example, if that were tested in the traditional test that that the government uses, the so-called bioassay program for testing chemical carcinogens, were that to be tested under those particular conditions, there is no doubt in my mind it would be the most potent chemical carcinogen ever identified. So then the question arises that you just inferred, how does this thing work? Well, one of the things we know about animal protein itself is that it stimulates the production of free radicals, which is, of course, a problem. It also represses the immune system in the form of, for example, it represses the production of natural killer cells, just to name one thing. So the animal protein is doing a lot of things a lot of things, every one of which sort of increases risk for disease. But then when we're consuming that kind of diet, everything else is going wrong too. We're not consuming plant-based foods, which have all the good antioxidants. So it gets rather complex and that sort of stuff, but all of it sort of feeds into the same final result. Animal food is not the thing to do. It's that simple.
Yeah, that's very fascinating that you describe it as adverse effects on the immune system. And we're going to get into this in a few minutes regarding the effects on viral infection and all. You do have some slides. Were you able to find those slides or share them? I think we were having some technical problems, but if we want to, we can give it one more try. If not, we can do without them. Did you see that share screen?
Yeah, I can try, and Dr. Montgomery, I can do without the slides if you like, but
yeah, that's fine. Well, share, talk to us about because we had a talk earlier on the show a few months ago, about the antiviral effects of a plant-based diet.
Gosh, this is really bad luck. I can't pull it up right now. I have no idea why we're having so much trouble.
No, that's okay.
Share screen. I see it. It shows it on my screen, but then when I say, let's get on with it.
Go to applications.
Sits there. Pardon?
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah, I can describe it because it might detract too much trying to get to that.
No problem.
Yes. Well, with the coronavirus issue that's arisen, during the last year or so, I recalled that in our study in China done now over between 30 and 40 years ago, and incidentally, for those who are listening, that was a big nationwide study in rural China that I did with my colleague at the University of Oxford, and also with my Chinese colleagues, of course. We did a study that involved 130 villages, a total of 6,500 adults and their families. Then we repeated it later, and included Taiwan, and then it was up to 8,900 people. But in any case, that's the size of the study. What we had in front of us at that time was awareness that for a dozen different cancers and other diseases, they tended to be localized geographically in the country. So we organized this study incidentally with NIH support, and we did this study sort of examining in a total of 170 villages at that time. Why was cancer so common in certain places, not in others? And I might add why heart disease would tend to be concentrated too. So we measured a lot of factors, a lot of nutritional factors. And among all those factors we measured the exposure to a virus, a major virus, and one in particular, hepatitis B, which causes liver cancer. So we had evidence on where liver cancer occurred and where it did not, number one. Number two, then we measured the level of antigen in the blood of these people. That's the antigen to the virus. We also measured the antibody And so we had that kind of information. We had lots of nutritional characteristics. And just based on the statistically significant observations by themselves, just based on that, and we had technically, we had 12 correlations to examine, all of which were highly significant, or significant to be highly significant. And what they showed collectively, consistently too, was that the higher the consumption, you know what, this thing popped up here, I don't know why.
I brought in this slide.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, you did that. Okay, that looks good. Let me, can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Can y'all see that okay?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what I'm describing in this first chart here, I got a little pointer. Can you see my pointer?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's good. Just a little scheme. It's a little scheme showing the relationship between, in this case, the virus causing liver cancer. The virus causing liver cancer. That abbreviation is hepatitis B surface antigen. But in any case, there's the virus. That's the active virus. Now, all viruses, eventually, when they come to our attention, they've invaded our bodies. So when they come into us, let's call it a human host. When they first arrive, then we can test for them. There they are. We consider it that's considered a positive state, if you will. At that point, the virus, and this is true with really all viruses, first thing they have to deal with is our immune system. So here's a virus here now in a body. It can go one of two ways. It either can do its dirty work, in this case, is liver cancer, or it can be, let's say, immunity that can be created against it, in which case we tend to see antibodies. So now we're in a position to look at antigen, that's the active virus, and the antibodies, which is the inactive virus, or the antibody. And so that's what we had in China. We had an opportunity to look at the antigen that was present, and the antibody was present in a total of 8,900 people. We also had information on liver cancer, of course, and according to that map you can't see very well, that's for breast cancer. The liver cancer is concentrated in certain areas. In any case, we were able to compare the amount of liver cancer with active virus, if you will, the antigen, and also compare it with the presence of antibodies. And so then we had a bunch of nutritional factors, as I said before, that we could compare it to. And we could ask this question here: what kind of nutrition basically favors inactivation, or let's say formation of immunity? So we had that opportunity. Lots of things. Now, if you just move it up on the next slide. Now, okay, so I'm listing here some of the things, some of the factors that were correlated. These are all statistically significant correlations. 1 star means significant 0.01 level, 2 stars 0.05, and then 0.01, and the 3 stars at 0.001. So it's highly, highly significant. Let me just try to summarize that if I can. Here we have antigens. Okay, the presence of the antigen, the active virus, in these folks was highly correlated with liver cancer, not surprisingly. That's really what it was. That in turn was related to the consumption of animal protein, which in turn generates higher levels of total cholesterol, which already were low in China, but a small amount of animal protein consumption actually increased significantly the amount of total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol. That's I show on the left. On the right here, we also had an opportunity of seeing what animal food did versus antibody. More dietary animal food consumption, less antibody. More percent of animal food, the dietary cholesterol. In other words, consuming animal-based food that it was a small amount, I might add, compared to us. That was enough to actually depress antibody formation.
What percent of the animal protein per caloric intake were they consuming there in China?
It was about 1/10 on average than what we do here.
Wow.
1/10. It was really a very small amount. And so, but there was enough. I didn't think we'd see anything with that small amount of protein, to be honest about it. And in fact, if we saw anything, and even statistically significant results, that's pretty striking. So now let's go a step further. One more slide down. Now I'm going to talk about animal food itself. I mean, plant food. In the case of plant food, as plant food is increased, that's when antigen is decreased. In other words, the plant food is actually decreasing the active virus. Very nice. Alternatively, it's increasing the antibody formation as measured by total fiber, plant protein itself, and dietary vegetables. Consuming vegetables is highly significantly related to the formation of antibodies and inversely related to the antigen. It could hardly be more impressive. So consuming plants in this case really kind of fought back against the virus, if you will, for that virus. It's quite nice.
Wow.
And of course, that translated into that plant food was not correlated with liver cancer. Animal food was.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
What kind? So when you say animal protein, like, were they all eating a certain type of meat, or was it kind of like all meat? Was it fish, chicken? You see what I'm saying? Like, was that controlled?
Not really. We had some control of it, but total was so much it didn't really make much difference what it was. But I can say, though, nonetheless, that most of the animal food consumed in China was pork.
Yeah.
And some chicken. Not much in the way of meat itself. That's been changing, by the way, since then. As we're consuming more dairy, for example. They weren't consuming any dairy at that time, I should add. So this is just animal food. And that's a good question, because I feel that animal protein from any source of animal food is acting more or less the same way for all practical purposes. There's previous research on that. It goes back to the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s in that area. But animal protein itself is rather similar to different animal proteins in terms of what they do. So here we have it. So summarize the last slide, this slide. What we see, if we can go down here, here's a quick snapshot of trying to summarize it. We got active virus, that's antigen. We got inactive virus, that's antibody, okay. Plant food favors the conversion of the active virus to its immunized form, antibody. Animal food, in contrast, it says, hey, let's push it back this way over here, get this antigen. That's in turn what gives rise to the liver cancer. It's so distinct, it's so sharp. I've rarely seen anything in research that was as sort of classical as that. We came back to the lab after that, and if you go to the next slide, and we had some opportunity to compare or to investigate the effect of animal protein on the production of liver cancer from that virus in some mice. These are mice, were said to be transgenic. They actually programmed. They have the virus as part of their system, and all those mice get liver cancer. But what we did, we just sort of fed them different levels of animal protein. And what I'm going to show you here, this is a liver section. This liver section. Here's in this case here, this is an animal that did not have the gene. Normal tissue. It doesn't see it clearly there, but that's what it is, normal tissue. And then here's three different levels of protein. The animal's given the lowest level of protein, just like the one that's without the virus. Pretty normal. Doesn't look like it much here, but it is about the same. The animal's given the highest levels. You can see all that dark stain. That's the hepatitis B surface antigen. That's the beginnings of cancer. This is 20% protein here. This is 14% dietary protein, and that's 6% actually. All of that's being used for good purposes. So you see the striking difference here. Higher animal protein are turning on the cancer. This is, and as I say, experimental setting, the laboratory, and it corresponds so beautifully with what we see in the human population. Using it, the various correlations. So I'm saying that, wow, this hepatitis B virus thing is really pretty significant. Now let's go over here. One more slide down. Here's what I'm proposing. I have to say it's a hypothesis because we haven't tested it. We're not going to be able to test it like we might like to, but this is for the coronavirus. I'm going to say that the same thing is highly likely to be happening with the COVID-19 virus as well. Here it is out in our atmosphere, in the air, whatever it is. We come in, we get infected with it. Now it's asymptomatic, but we test positive. We test positive. Now, in some period of time, in the case of coronavirus, what is it, 2 weeks or 1 to 2 weeks or something, we start seeing the evidence, to get the symptoms. Or, in theory, we can get some immunity against that virus. And whole food plant-based diet, here's what I'm saying, the whole food based diet, acting quickly, if people do it right, is going to actually take that virus and is going to basically form antibody. In contrast, it's going to be blocking the formation of the symptoms. Now, how much we don't know that, but I'm going to say it's pretty substantial. There's one more piece of the puzzle too. Just one more slide, I guess you could say here, Ashley. So here we go. We all know that most of the people who get the coronavirus symptoms, of course, are older, 60 years of age and older, if you will. 95% plus of those folks really are experiencing bad nutrition, as evidenced by the presence of heart disease, various cardiovascular diseases, or neoplasia, or diabetes, what have you. So they're up here, sitting up here like this. When they're in that state, as we know from other, and Dr. Montgomery, you can attest to this. I mean, we know that people who are already compromised in bad nutrition, at that point in time, if they're infected with, let's say, another virus, they're the ones that are most likely to suffer the consequences. So I'm saying the same thing here. Here's people up here, with the problems that they have. The virus comes along, it creates a comorbidity situation. They're the ones that get the disease. So these folks who are not so well nutritionally speaking are getting hit in two ways. First off, they already have the disease. That puts them at risk. The second thing is, of course, they're not consuming it even at that time, not able to form antibodies. I don't know. I think this story is very, very exciting. It's a missing link.
No, you mentioned something earlier, and I think you can connect the dots. You show how, and we've seen in other studies, and I think your data shows animal protein consumption is associated with increased number of free radicals.
Right.
Of course, it suppresses the immune system by a number of mechanisms, by reducing NK cells, etc. We know that patients who become more symptomatic with not only coronavirus, but any infectious disease, they typically have increased oxidative stress. The more free radicals you have compared to the more antioxidant you have, portends a greater amount of oxidative stress.
Right.
And I suspect that the issue we're dealing with is that people who are on an animal protein diet, regardless of their age and comorbidities, let's say you've been eating cheeseburgers, because I've seen patients, I can give you an example, one patient in particular, I hear stories all the time. She was working on a lot of projects, and she ate fried chicken multiple times a day for 3 days in a row, and she ended up having massive pulmonary emboli, blood clots to the lung. This happened to her on 2 different occasions, about 6 years apart. We know that people with advanced infections have increased clotting. We know COVID-19 is associated with increased clotting. We know increased clotting can be associated with autoimmune diseases. All of these things have the common denominator of increased free radicals, increased oxidative stress, which increase formation of cytokines, etc. Now, oftentimes you may have a trigger in certain cases, whether it's a food or something like an infection. But someone who has increased oxidative stress, i.e. increased number of free radicals floating around in their system, they're like a time bomb. And the only thing they need to set them off to illness is some kind of a trigger. A COVID-19 infection is one such trigger, but any other infection can have the same trigger. And so we know these patients, the ones who get sick and who die, have increased cytokine storms, increased clotting, increased autoimmune processes, which is pretty much what you're seeing here. In this case, is triggering cancer. In their case, is triggering systemic illness, inflammation, clotting, etc. But I think that the common denominator seems to be the increased free radicals leading to increased oxidative stress.
That's a beautiful, beautiful companion bit of information, I must say, especially what you're talking about, the COVID-19 situation. That's fantastic.
These diseases have a common denominator. And just, for the sake of our audience who may not have a medical background, when I talk about increased oxidative stress, just think of your body having a lot of toxic chemicals. And maybe these toxic chemicals could be analogous to gas fumes in a room. So you can have a room filled with gas fumes, and maybe you have a leaking gas pipe in your house. And so the room is being filled with gas fumes. And by itself, it doesn't smell bad. And maybe if you're not exposed to it too much, you don't get too sick until somebody strikes a match or there's a spark, and then things explode. And that's what you have when you walk around, you're eating a toxic diet. So the food tastes good, it feels good, but you're loading your body up with free radicals. And you're walking time bomb because all you have to do is get an infection that triggers, it's like a spark, and it triggers your immune system, but the immune system is off balance because you have this oxidative stress, and then you get the cytokine storm, which is essentially your body attacking itself. And so this animal protein is one major contributing factor to, seemingly, based on your data, to this increased oxidative stress.
Absolutely beautiful statement. You've done much better than I. I mean, just to describe that essentially comorbidity sort of phenomenon. These people are sitting there, they're a time bomb ready to go. All they need to do is to get the trigger, and that's yeah.
You make some. You have this wonderful perspective on things. Where are we today with our scientific knowledge? What is the evidence that we have today, and what does that evidence say? We're in a pandemic now. We've got people listening. The people are going to be looking at the show after we're off tonight. Where are we now with the nutritional science? How can based on the nutritional science, how can we affect where we are now with this pandemic and other health illnesses?
Hey, Dr. Montgomery, I have a request. Can I take about 3 minutes?
Sure.
I'll be right back.
Okay, no problem.
I got a teacher in the class. Can I?
Oh, no problem. Until Dr. Campbell comes back, I think what we'd like to do is kind of continue this discussion. Shonda, we have a number of people who've been through the Colin Campbell program. Some people like the understanding oxidative stress. But what I'm getting at, and we'll get Dr. Campbell's input once he returns, but it seems as though we have, and I'd like to get your input, Isos and Celeste, if we know that nutrition can have a big impact on chronic illnesses, what should we say, what can we say about the impact, the potential impact of nutrition on illnesses such as COVID-19 or future pandemics or the like?
So I would add to all the stuff about oxidative stress and animal plant-based diets and all that stuff as well. But people always talk about oxidative stress and they forget that your immunity is the sum total of your entire lifestyle. So I've met people who are on a plant-based diet who got cancer, but they they had emotional stress that was intense. Like that particular woman I'm talking about was abused for 15 years and then her husband died and then she got cancer, but she was a vegetarian. So we can't just look at it just like, we can't just focus in only on, of course we need to eat our vegetables and have a clean diet, but we have to realize that if we don't sleep, if we are emotionally stressed out all the time or can't manage the emotional stress, because we're all going to have emotional stress, but if we don't put things in place to manage the emotional stress, you can still cause enough stress to make yourself ill.
So there are other factors other than the food that comes into play. And I agree with you. I think that has an impact. One thing I will say is that there are a lot of people who follow a so-called plant-based diet, a vegetarian vegan diet, who are eating unhealthy foods. And
Totally.
so that's another factor that comes into play. Let's say you're a vegetarian or vegan, and you may not be eating animal protein, but you're eating processed foods and things like that. What are your thoughts on in that regard? Not only just with the food, but other aspects of lifestyle.
Well, I'm big on lifestyle and trying to live in that space myself as far as spending time outside. I mean, I think if you look historically at kind of how we grew up, our generation definitely spent more time outside. We climbed trees. We didn't have the PlayStation, and we didn't have these types of things that keep children in the house all day. And I'm a pediatrician, so I see a lot of fractures and things that I didn't used to see when I first started practicing, because I feel like the body is weaker in some instances, and so a simple fall now leads to a fracture, whereas in the past it may have caused a bruise, but it was not a fracture. So just trying, and then also I think defining what whole food plant-based means, because a lot of times nowadays, the industry has gotten a little bit more tricky. And so these pureed packs, a lot of parents find that as a convenient thing to give to their toddlers, for example, and it's pureed vegetables and fruit inside of a package. And so they think that they're doing something good because this is a vegetable that their child will actually eat. But, trying to even break that down, and because in my mind that counts as also junk food. But I think that there's a large confusion and misunderstanding of what real food is versus what kind of packaged convenient food is. And that's where we have a lot of problems in pediatrics, because and the children will eat the packaged food because they have infused it with some type of preservatives and sugars that make it have a better taste. And then so it's a struggle, because even though we're saying, whole food, plant-based, when you have a child who's used to having a certain taste, it's very difficult to then take them all the way back to whole food, plant-based vegetables, because they just are going to refuse to take it in that form. But I do try to spend time with the parents and get them back to a point where they are willing to try some things. We talk about starting with smoothies. I know that's not what we want to do ultimately, but working with children, you have to kind of start where they are and work backwards, starting with smoothies, maybe starting with celery sticks with some almond butter on it, just to kind of help them, and some raisins, just to kind of help them to kind of get used to a plant taste. Such that everything doesn't have to be sugar.
Wow. So, Dr. Campbell, my colleagues have really opened up a can of worms. We've gone beyond the dimension of nutrition, which I think we all agreed, and as you stepped away, we all agreed a plant-based diet is actually very beneficial and also ideal. And we even went to the fact that we should consume a natural, healthy plant-based diet consistent with your concept of whole foods. But both Isosa and Celeste raised excellent points about not only have we gotten away from nature in terms of the foods we consume, but we've gotten away from nature in terms of other aspects of our lifestyle. We lead stressful lives, and many of us are under emotional stress and various things. We're indoors most of the time. I can imagine, you being raised on a dairy farm, you were outdoors a lot. And doing things. And I remember when I was young, outdoors, mowing the grass, etc. The whole environments have changed, and so on and so forth. So it's we brought this whole spectrum. Cancer is kind of a funny animal because it's the trickiest disease that we treat with nutrition. Somebody comes with diabetes, and I put them on the natural plant-based diet. The diabetes just run away like cockroaches in daylight. But cancer is kind of a funny animal, And we have seen a number of people who are on a whole food plant-based diet, or at least they say they are. At least they're not eating a lot of animal protein, and they have other aspects of their lives, and they get cancer. What in your data have you seen that may suggest there are other factors in addition to the food, such as maybe the water or the lack of fresh air, sunshine, or lifestyle and other factors?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm any more schooled on that than anyone else, but it's very clear. I mean, just the work of a variety of people. All three of you, sort of said this or heard this. Yeah, sunshine, being outdoors, I think is a really important thing. For one, obviously getting out enough water, and as we tend to get older, of course, Vasha, you can speak to this. I think older people tend not to get enough water. That's my impression. So, lack of hydration is a significant factor. So water, sunshine, obviously exercise, staying active. As far as the contaminants in the atmosphere are concerned and that sort of thing, I think you're asking that too. It's gotten worse, far worse. I mean, when I was young on a farm, I recall, pesticides hadn't even been invented at that time. And as a matter of fact, the fertilizer that we were using for our fields was the stuff from the barn, the cow manure. And so, if we were not knowing it, the word organic food wasn't even invented as far as I'm aware. We were actually producing organic food. And the same thing with our garden. And we have gotten so far off track. We are indoors. I think, Dr. Palmer, what you were just saying about children, I was really interested in that. Of all the people, somehow we've really got to focus on, in my impression, you probably agree with this, it's really our children. But getting children to actually get into this and like it and go on from there. We've got a big family ourselves, and all of our kids are doing this, but we got some very young grandchildren right now. We got one granddaughter. She's now 7 years old. She is just really fighting it. And even though her mother, what can we do? I mean, what do you do with a child?
I think children, I think you have to get them involved. And I know from just personal experience, I mean, I know it sounds extreme, but I think we're living in extreme times. I think that people need to have little farms in their back, not a full farm, but grow something in their backyard that the child is involved with. Because I have a couple of friends who do that. And when children come, it's a community garden, but when the children come, they will grab the food off of the plant and just eat it right there because it's fun, it's interesting, and this is a food, I can actually grab it and eat it. And so they'll be outside just eating because it's fun. And so I think we have to get children back involved in the process of growing and having them touch and be out in nature again. So they're actually interested in eating because they now know the process. I think as humans, we develop an interest in things based on cultivating it. When something is just given to us, we have a tendency to not have as much interest in it. So I think that shows up and it's more apparent in children because now we are competing with sugar, and I use sugar because that's the main ingredient that addicts children to a lot of this processed food, and nature. So it's sugar against nature is what I feel like we are dealing with. And that sugar addiction is very difficult to break because I feel like in addition to the impact that it has on their thinking, it also has a physical impact on their body. And it also gives them a little bit of a rush. You get a sugar rush from nature, you're not going to get that. So, if parents, if they remove the children from the house, let them go outside, you're going to, you have your little pots of food that we're growing here, and this is what we do for maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes a day, I think it will spark some interest in now trying some things. I'm not saying that they're going to be excited about eating all whole food, plant-based foods, but understanding the balance. And a lot of times I also find that when I explain to parents and then I explain to the children, especially my young teenagers, the importance of food and the importance of nutrition, I think this is we've lost that. Then they're interested in doing better because nowadays children carry a lot of fear, and they carry a lot of fear that they're going to die from cancer because they see on TV. If you look at commercials and advertisements, it's a lot of cancer commercials. So that runs through their subconscious, and so they have a lot of this fear. So also empowering them with information so that they understand their body, so it doesn't make them, so they're not feeling like these illnesses are mysterious illnesses that just come out of nowhere and attack them. That they actually have some sort of control over the health of their body.
Wow.
That's the best. That is the best answer I've asked that for others. I have to tell you, it's the best answer that I've heard. You're right in the center of the page on that one.
Yeah, I like the idea of growing a garden in your backyard. I'm trying to do the same thing, so I'm glad that I'm not headed up the wrong tree.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure, yes.
So, Dr. Campbell, I feel like the more that I study nutrition, and I also am into like Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, all this stuff, right? The more I feel like the future of nutrition, I mean, and like I actually have longevity in my family. Both of my grandmothers lived to over 100, right?
Wow.
And so, but I'm like, how is that possible to replicate in today's landscape? And so my mind, when I think of the future of nutrition, I think of all this cool technology that I'm into, like all of the DNA testing and nutrigenetics and nutrigenomics. But then I also really strongly believe that the future of nutrition, if we're going to be healthy, is actually in the past. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
That's a really good point. I share your views on that. Coming, I feel like I've lived in the past for a while. I've been around for quite a long time. But in any case, what that touches on for me is this idea of whole food, as opposed to taking nutrients out of the food and putting them into supplements. I mean, there's something special about nutrients when present in whole food. They're doing good work. That's what we really should be talking about, the whole food. I find that concept of whole, if you will, that was my second book, but to be a fascinating one. And I think what we have done in the modern day, we focus more and more on single nutrients, and obviously that extends to single chemicals that we call drugs, as if it's substituting for the whole food. We've strayed a long ways from what it was since I was a kid, and we're getting into trouble. I've seen data, for example, on drug use. I'm talking about prescription drug use. It's really the third or fourth leading cause of death in this country. The CDC doesn't mention it, but on the one hand, on the other hand, we don't teach nutrition in the medical schools or nursing schools. Yeah. So we're all focused on, as you just suggested, we're focused on this technology, pills and procedures, et cetera. We've gotten away from nutrition.
I'm glad they didn't teach me nutrition in medical schools. They would have taught me the wrong stuff. So I came out eating slate. And so when I started learning about plant foods, I didn't have to erase a lot of stuff. So I think in my case, that was a blessing. But I understand your point.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing in my field. We're nutritional scientists, but we do anything but nutrition.
Wow.
What we're doing is working on single nutrients. And, it's really funny. This came up about 20 years ago. Some people started calling nutrients nutraceuticals.
Yeah.
I thought it was a disgusting suggestion. We don't have to live that way. We don't have to practice that way. But nutrition, the whole thing, we're all working together, really does marvelous things.
That last point before we close out, Dr. Campbell, we have a number of questions, but get my own ask the questions. Are vegetarians typically B12 and vitamin D deficient? Can you comment on those two things? It's a common question that comes up in the context of a plant-based diet. So B12 and vitamin D deficiency.
Well, the first thing I would say about B12 is that is the one exception I think that we should pay some attention to. B12 is, of course, not exclusively provided by animal food. That's not the point. It's actually made by bacteria. And so, it's in our gut possibly, But in any case, a little supplementation on that one, especially when we get tested and we're low. Okay, do the supplementation thing. On vitamin D, I don't know. I think I'm not as fond of administering vitamin D, to be honest about it. My son, who did the book with me, he's a physician himself right now. He differs with me a little bit. He thinks little vitamin D supplementation early on is worthwhile. I've got some concerns about the biochemistry of vitamin D, and that puts me not completely on board with supplementation there, unless it's really indicated.
I think I agree with you there. It's we supplement vitamin D because it's hard to get people outdoors. I think vitamin D behaves more like a hormone as opposed to a vitamin. And it's probably low vitamin D is probably a marker that you're not getting enough fresh air and sunshine. There are many other benefits of fresh air and sunshine that we can't measure. Vitamin D is the one thing we can, and maybe it's a signal that we're not getting enough fresh air and sunshine. So I think that's the size of it.
That's where your backyard gardening and just grabbing off of the plant will come in handy too. Because when I say grab off the plant, I'm not talking about going in and washing it. Just take it in. I wouldn't do that from the grocery store. Not the grocery store. We're talking about backyard, because what you have put in those in the earth. Hopefully you've grown it organically. I'm using that word loosely, but you've grown it and you know what you've used to help grow the plant, and you just grab and go.
And that's a nice thing too, because you get your B12 from your gut flora. Your microbiome is going to be enhanced, as you said, by digging in the dirt and the gardening. And if you're doing it outside, you get your vitamin D too. So outdoor gardening may be the answer to both that B12 and vitamin D deficiency if you do enough of it. So
the vitamin D. So if I break down any vegan's food diary, they're usually going to be low in those two things. But then depending on the person, if they're deficient in vitamin D, I think the problem becomes when you mega dose vitamin D and you also don't pay attention to vitamin K, which is balanced out with it. And especially if it's an older person. So I have some people that are postmenopausal, and I don't want them on these mega dose vitamin Ds without balancing out whatever. It's just the fact that the problem is, it's kind of back to what Dr. Campbell was saying. When you focus on single nutrients and you forget that they're all balanced by something else, it can cause problems.
So, and it's hard to recreate. It's hard to recreate what nature's doing. And so, I agree. And that's why, we're trying to do the balancing in the lab, and we can't recreate, what God has done in his wonderful creation. So fantastic. Hey, everyone, this has been a wonderful discussion. And my goodness, we can go on and on. But Dr. Campbell, thank you very much. Everybody in the audience online, give Dr. Campbell a digital applause. Give the whole panel a digital applause. This has been an exciting discussion. As always, I learned a lot, and a lot of insight has been gained tonight. So thank you very much. And I'm going to see you guys backstage once I close out the show. But thank you very much for your insight, and we will move forward. So everyone, thank you very much. This has been another exciting lesson. Dr. T. Colin Campbell and the panel has really enlightened us all in terms of the power of nutrition and how it can impact our lives, not only from the standpoint of chronic illnesses. We're now in the midst of a pandemic. The coronavirus has really reshaped our lives in many ways. Many of you may have loved ones who've become ill, unfortunately may have died. It's a very very tragic event. However, there are some things that we can do, and what we try to do with this show in general is to empower you with knowledge. And I think the knowledge that we've gained tonight is the power of a plant-based nutritional diet can help build your immune system. And even in the time of a pandemic, when everybody's running and hiding and wearing masks, there's some things that you can do to improve your overall health and improve your overall chances against coronavirus. In addition to that, we've learned other things in terms of how you live your life in total. Your overall stress management, getting outdoors, taking time, resting. We emphasize a lot of these things on our show, and these things all go hand in hand to impact your overall healthy well-being. Because the whole idea is not so much of treating a disease per se, but rather enhancing your body's environment, enhancing your body's condition to then withstand any kind of a stress such as a disease or anything else that may affect your life. So I hope this has been helpful to you tonight. I want you to remember to, if you did find this helpful, please subscribe and like and share with many friends. This talk needs to go viral. If you have any questions about our program, you can email us at wellness@montgomeryhart.com. And of course, we have an online program, the Nutritional Bootcamp online, if you want to have more detailed instructions on how to enhance your life and improve your overall health. Until next time, we want you to keep it fresh, natural, and live. Thanks again for watching us tonight.